Globally, the financial system is built around debt. No longer is there a real economy. It is all central banks creating this currency and doing so in a system of debt. So today we will discuss exactly what they're doing with our money. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. I want to get into what this all means and how it actually affects you as an individual. Let's begin with this chart out of Bloomberg. Not enough hours in the day. In these countries in blue, a 40-hour work week still won't lift families out of poverty. And if you look at the ratio, it's most countries, in fact. You're looking at a terrible situation for most people, that the minimum wage is not enough to get people by. So what happens in the developed nations, we have these type of welfare programs, social assistance, and what have you, and these really change the situation. But what does that do? That puts a bigger burden on the government. So oftentimes the solution that they've provided is to raise the minimum wage. Now, of course, this does help slightly, but all that does really is put a band-aid over the real wound that's there. We need to increase the prosperity of the nation so that businesses can hire more and not just increase the minimum wage, which then leaves some people unemployed because the companies can't afford them. So this is really not just a one-sided argument here. The fact remains is that countries around the world globally are feeling the same pain as those in the US. Let's look at this here. The US Macro Surprise Index says right here at the bottom, the fastest ever drop. And how many times have we been saying this, that it is at least just as bad as it was during the Lehman crisis? This continues to happen over and over and over again. But no matter how many charts I'm showing here, no matter how much historical data, no matter how many diagrams I've drawn out to explain it, the general public doesn't get it. So it's quite unfortunate, but we need to still look into the information and continue to remain on course with this. I'm going to move on to this here, the Baltic Dry Index. We're looking at shipping, and obviously the shipping is one very important indicator. Those who are in the shipping industry, those who are involved in it in any way, perhaps with their businesses that go along the line for that, or just individuals who are investing or just looking at the markets, the Baltic Dry Index is incredibly essential to look at. You can see what has happened since the financial crisis, where it has gone to extremely low levels, heading down. We haven't seen this level here in a very, very long time. In fact, it's worse than during the financial crisis. How many times do I have to say this? Let's move on to this. Student and car loans becoming a very, very serious problem as we see them continuously increasing. It is practically a straight line upward for student loans, and car loans, of course, increasing as well. When you have debt, what exactly happens with that debt? Now, you need to wrap your mind around how the monetary system works. In order for money to be basically put into existence, it has to be borrowed out of debt. Now, how does that debt get loaned out? Well, of course, it does so at interest. So this money then needs to be paid off. But it can't be ever fully paid off because there was interest on the amount that was initially borrowed. So although this is excessively complex, if you just break it down to its most simple form, you'll understand that this is mathematically impossible to pay back. I'm going to get into a diagram here, which I hope does explain this sort of deal and the way that they work this system of debt. They take our car loans, they take our credit card debt, mortgages, and they package them up into these what they call securities. Now, why do they call it securities? Because it's anything but secure. That's how they do that. If they want something, they call it the Patriot Act. In fact, it's the exact opposite of a patriot. If they want anti-terrorism, that's always something that creates terrorism. If they want anti-this, it's always the opposite of that. This is what happens. So they call them securities. They call them investments. They call them whatever the alphabet soup of trash. That's something I like to call often. We have a bunch of garbage basically being wrapped up with this nice little present. You got a bow on top. And then they tell their friends at the rating agencies to rate it AAA. How can they get away with this? Well, I'll show you in a moment. But for the time being, they're able to take all of this debt, wrap it up, rate it at AAA, and sell it on the market. Our debt is being used as an instrument to provide these bankers with more money. Take a look at that. The system that they set up from the central banks, where they print the money into existence, it's debt right from the very beginning, from the first moment. They lend it out to us at that interest rate. We then have to pay that back. If we do pay that back, if every dollar were to be paid back into the system, there still wouldn't be enough technically to pay it all off. That's how fraudulent the system is. That's why it has to continuously go into more debt, because more has to be printed, and then you have to borrow more, and it is at interest, and the system just self-perpetuating. This is unbelievable, the way they're allowed to do this. Speaking of debt, 30-year U.S. Treasury Yield 8 years ago. You could see that the last time it got as oversold as it is today was 2007. The ensuing months were very favorable to own it as the yields fell dramatically. So we're heading in the same direction right now. What does that tell us about the future? Well, in fact, that we are headed for the same exact troubles. Now, this may change. This is just one simple indicator of that. But you can see how these individuals at Kessler Investment Advisors, they're taking the information from Bloomberg, are showing you how we're headed into the same problems again. One very important indicator is to look at the different debt of a country. I like to look at things like this. This is, relatively informative. And also what they're doing. Are they going into the negative territory, and how the government is responding to that? And in fact, are people buying it up, or is it the central banks buying that up? Very important things to note as well. Let's look at this. Fed set tax haul record of nearly $500 billion in a month. Think about that for a second. Nearly $500 billion they got in one single month. $500 billion. And they're blowing it instantly. In fact, the debt ceiling needs to be raised consistently every single time. But according to Obama, raising the debt ceiling does not increase the debt. That's right. In fact, it does. That's happened every single time. So he has been wrong over and over and over again. Here is where the money is being squandered. Now let's look at this. Big media mogul compensation hit all-time high in 2014. The mainstream media is basically complicit in all of this criminality that goes on, whether it's through the financial system or the political sector, it doesn't matter. We have this taking place right before our very eyes, and nobody is saying anything because they're all being paid off. If you look down further in the article, I don't want to get into it, but essentially what's happened is you have a very select few companies that control all of the media across the world, for the most part. These individuals are getting compensation like you wouldn't believe. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in their compensation that is really quite ridiculous, in fact. However, they can get paid whatever they want. But when you look at where the money's coming from, look at the campaign contributions. All of this money is cycled in between each other as we have nothing but a fraudulent scheme occurring. The mainstream media is preventing individuals from knowing the truth. That is what is quite sad. But here at the Money GPS, I intend to bring out the truth as best I can and teach and educate at the same time. So I hope you all appreciate that. If you do, please give me a thumbs up. I'm really looking forward to all of the new types of videos that I'm going to bring out. I have many big plans for the Money GPS, so I do appreciate your support. And if you want to support me, which is something I get in emails all the time, the number one way is to give me a thumbs up. I really do appreciate that very much. Of course, become a subscriber on the YouTube channel. We have crossed 20,000 subscribers. Hello to each and every one of you. And last but not least, put a comment down below, and I will always try to get back to the comments. It is very important to me as well. If you like this information, you will surely enjoy the information in my book, The Money GPS. If you head over to Amazon, you can actually flip through the book on there and see if you like it for yourself. Take care.